The LA Kings GM search continues. Who have they talked to so far? Who's off the list? We talk about that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years. Also one of the co-hosts of Locked On NHL Game Night, a nightly podcast and YouTube show wrapping up the night in the NHL, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. The LA Kings search for their next general manager is underway. As far as who and how many people the Kings have talked to a week into the process, we don't know that for sure, but a report did emerge as to one name that they have officially interviewed for the job. It's a very intriguing name. The name is Ken Holland. Now, before I give you my thoughts on Holland as a potential general manager for the LA Kings, I do want to give you some background on who he is. Now, if you're a big-time NHL fan of a certain age, you probably know who he is. If not, here are some details. Ken Holland is 69 years old. He was born in Vernon, British Columbia, and once upon a time was drafted as a goalie by the Toronto Maple Leafs. He played a total of 4 NHL games, 1 with the Hartford Whalers and 3 with the Detroit Red Wings. And while his playing career was brief and unspectacular, he has been a very highly respected NHL GM and front office executive for many, many years. Most recently, he was the GM of the Edmonton Oilers for 5 seasons, constructing a team that made the playoffs all 5 years he was on the job, including beating the Kings 3 times in a row, and a team that made it to the Stanley Cup final last season. Now, after last season, the Oilers curiously decided to not renew Holland's contract. Both sides claimed it was a mutual decision. That sounds familiar. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But just imagine if the Kings would have lost in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final this year and then said goodbye to Rob Blake. Kind of hard to believe, but that's what happened with Ken Holland and the Edmonton Oilers last season. Now, this past year, Holland was a consultant with the league office. Before that, though, in Edmonton, he was the GM in Detroit for 22 years, which is where most fans probably know him best because he was the architect of a team that won 3 Stanley Cups, 1998, 2002, and 2008. And Kings president Luc Robitaille has a relationship with Ken Holland. He was the man that brought Luc to Detroit, and Luc was a member of that 2002 Stanley Cup winning team with the Red Wings. Ken Holland was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2020. So clearly there is no question Ken Holland brings a ton of experience and success to the table. I'm not sure anyone else could bring more accomplishments as a previous GM to the job that's available. The only issue I guess I would have with him is, maybe his age. Is his passion for the game still there? His vision? While his resume is about as good as it could possibly be, if we're talking about new eyes, new ideas, new visions, is his vision going to be any more innovative or forward-thinking than Rob Blake's was? Is his passion for the job going to be more than a younger GM who's getting the chance to prove him or herself for the first time? Now, maybe I'm looking for something to be critical about, but that's what comes to mind when I think of a guy like Ken Holland. He seems to be old school, but that doesn't necessarily mean he still doesn't have fire and passion and drive. Maybe he does. Certainly, he's still relevant in the game recently. After all, as I mentioned, he just took a team that he constructed to the Stanley Cup final. So this isn't an old GM who's just living off his glory years from decades before. So I will admit that, I would like to see a version of a Ken Holland as the Kings' next head coach. I think the Kings need a veteran hand steering the ship who has had success at the highest levels. But I think I prefer a younger forward-thinking, innovative, kind of hungry general manager as the Kings' next GM. But that's just me. If Ken Holland is the guy, I'm certainly not going to be upset about it. Regardless of his age or energy for the job, his experience is without question. He is someone who's coming in from the outside. He's not someone who's been in the Kings organization. He's not a friend of Luc Robitaille necessarily. They do have a relationship, obviously, from him bringing Luc to Detroit many years ago. But I mean, look, 6 degrees of separation. The hockey world is kind of a small family. I mean, you're going to have relationships most likely with a lot of different people. So yes, Luc and Ken Holland's paths have crossed before, but I think it's acceptable. It's not like this is a guy that is one of Luc's friends that he's hiring, right? So Ken Holland obviously knows the Kings very well, having unfortunately taken them down 3 years in a row in the playoffs while he was the GM at Edmonton. I would have to assume he has a pretty decent grasp of who the Kings are and how to point them in the right direction, and specifically how to beat the Edmonton Oilers. Obviously, things have changed in the one season that he hasn't been with the Oilers, but I think for the most part, a lot of those lessons that he may have learned, some of the intel that he had gathered on both sides could certainly help. And the Kings are in that weird position where they're not rebuilding. They're still a relatively young team, but clearly they need some changes and some tweaks. Seems like Ken Holland could be good at taking on that kind of a challenge. He's not a complete rebuild. It's not like he's starting from scratch by any stretch. So there is a lot about Ken Holland as the Kings' potential next general manager that there is to like about it. And I think a lot of it does make sense. I certainly don't think he'd be a bad hire. I mean, this is a guy who has won Stanley Cups and just recently again took a team to the Stanley Cup final. So I do think it's encouraging. The Kings are talking to someone like a Ken Holland again outside the organization, a guy who does, though, have some familiarity as far as the Kings as an opponent. Saw them up close and personal several times. So I do think that Ken Holland it would be a good hire for the LA Kings. His experience again is beyond reproach. So I think it would be a good hire. I'm not sure if it would be the first, hire that I would make, or he would be number one on my list necessarily, but he would be pretty high. He would be pretty high. And the Kings could do a lot worse than Ken Holland. That is for sure. Now, Eric Stevens of The Athletic, a former guest on this show, came out with an article recently, and he had a long list of interesting names who are, in his opinion, candidates to be the next Kings general manager. Some of them we've touched on before: Mark Bergevin, Nelson Emerson, Mike Fuda. And we'll definitely be getting into some of the names on his list at some point: Matthew Darsh, Jarmo Kekalainen, Ray Whitney, Cami Granado. But one of the names on Eric Stevens' list that is apparently out of the running is Pat Brisson. TSN's Pierre Lebrun, one of the hockey insiders of a certain note, says that the high-profile hockey agent and good friend of Luc Robitaille will not be interviewing for the job. Lebrun reports that Brisson, who is the co-head of CAA's hockey division, is reportedly not interested in leaving his position at the agency. Pat Brisson is 60 years old. He played with Robitaille in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League way back in the 80s with the Hull Olympiques. Brisson later represented Luc Robitaille as his agent during his playing career, as he has represented many big-name hockey players. He's one of the big power brokers as far as agents in the NHL. He's represented Sidney Crosby, Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane, and Anze Kopitar, among others. And you might think hiring a former agent to be an NHL GM is an outside-the-box idea, but not really. As a matter of fact, Ken Holland, who we just talked about, is a one-time former agent. Lou Lamoriello, longtime GM of the Devils and Islanders, another Hockey Hall of Famer, former agent. Jim Nill, one of the most respected current GMs for the Dallas Stars, a former agent. And most recently, Kent Hughes of the Montreal Canadiens, another former agent. All have become successful and well-respected GMs. And as far as I've heard, Brisson is the only former agent that the Kings have on their list, or had on their list as a potential GM. I don't know if there's any others, but as far as, again, as I've heard, he was the only one. But apparently, again, Pat Brisson, super agent in the NHL, good friend of Luc Robitaille, apparently not on the list of potential GMs for the LA Kings. And I'm not sure how I would have felt about Brisson as the Kings' next GM. I think he could have been an interesting choice. The obvious downside is he doesn't have any GM experience, but he would likely come in with some fresh ideas and a different perspective at looking at things. Clearly, he's someone who knows contract negotiations and deals with NHL GMs all the time, so he has a relationship with other GMs. He's seen, the relationship between players and front offices in the NHL from another side. Maybe he could put his spin on that coming from a GM perspective. Clearly, he knows how to deal with players. The obvious other downsides would be, has he dealt much with coaches? He's never hired a head coach before. So if he wanted to replace a Jim Miller, that would be something new that he would have to do. Clearly, he has a great relationship with Luc Robitaille, but that also could have been an issue as well, both positively and negatively. Do you challenge your friend? Do you tell your friend what he's been doing wrong or what's been going wrong with him running the franchise? Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you're such good friends that you can be totally honest and truthful with that person. So again, Pat Brisson would have been an intriguing next Kings GM, but probably best he's not in consideration for the job anymore. There certainly would have been a lot of ridicule over, look, Luc Robitaille's hiring another one of his buddies type of thing. Up next, we're going to start our player profiles. We're going to look at a member of the LA Kings from this past season and look ahead to their future with the team. That's next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. We're going to get into talking about Kings players from this past season and looking ahead to their status with the team going forward. And seems appropriate to start with Kings captain Anze Kopitar. Just wrapped up his 19th season, all with the Kings, former first-round pick in 2005, 11th overall. He is the franchise leader in games played and assists, third in goals scored, first in game-winning goals, and second in points. He enters next season just 30 points away from passing Marcel Dion to become the Kings' all-time leader in points, and barring injury, he should be able to do that pretty easily. I've said I believe Anze Kopitar is the greatest LA King of all time. Even if you don't believe that, he's at the very least in the top three. He's been the captain of the team since 2016, two-time Stanley Cup winner, two-time Selke Trophy winner, the only LA King ever to win that award, and he's done it twice, going out to the best defensive forward in the league. He's been a two-time Lady Byng Award winner. He's a finalist for that award again this season, and he was a Marc Messier Leadership Award winner. He's a five-time All-Star, and when it's all said and done, he'll have his number 11 hanging in the rafters of Crypto.com Arena, a statue outside the arena, and he will be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Probably a first ballot, but depends on who would be eligible at the same time that he is. He was the team's second leading scorer this past season with 21 goals and a team-leading 46 assists for 67 points. He was second on the team in playoff scoring with 2 goals and 7 assists for 9 points. Started off the season on fire, cooled off a bit during the middle of the season, got a little bit hot at the end. But that said, a solid season for Anze Kopitar. He will turn 38 by the start of next season, and clearly he is in the final years, if not the final year, of what has been an amazing career. Now, is he a top-line center anymore? No. But he was the Kings' top-line center, and he was kind of the only choice to be. Philip Deneau is not a number one center, and Quentin Byfield was just being moved to center this season. Certainly, he wasn't ready to be the Kings' number one center to start the year. So Kopitar had to be the number one center this season. And it's still, he's still a very respectable two-way center. Now, the transition to Quentin Byfield to be the Kings' number one center, I think, is underway. In the playoffs, Kopitar's minutes were more like a second or even a third line center at times. In the series against the Oilers, Quentin Byfield had more ice time in 5 of the 6 playoff games than Anze Kopitar. Even Philip Deneau had more ice time than Anze Kopitar in 2 of the 6 games. So the reality is Anze Kopitar isn't the Kings' number one center anymore. Quentin Byfield is. And obviously that will continue to be the case next season and beyond. The transition that the Kings were ultimately hoping to make when they drafted Quentin Byfield is in process of happening, and that should be the case starting next season. Quentin Byfield will be the Kings' number one center. Now, I have heard some criticism of Anze Kopitar as the team captain, and I'm certainly not above saying that, he's someone who can't be criticized. But I also will admit I'm a huge Anze Kopitar fan, but why wouldn't I be? I mean, yes, he's not the player he once was. No one would argue that. But again, he's still a productive player. And I think the only real debate with Kopitar is his minutes played. And like I said, I think the transition is now taking place. I think his minutes will be reduced going forward. He's not going to be getting the most ice time of the centers, as he probably did for most of the regular season. But as we said, when the games got bigger and it mattered most in the playoffs, he wasn't getting the most ice time. As for his leadership and him being a good captain, I guess this is all up for interpretation to what you think makes a good captain. I know some people don't like the fact that Kopi is not the most fiery personality, and some think that you have to be that, I guess, to be a good captain. I don't agree with that. What you have to have is respect. We've been talking about the Red Wings a little bit. Steve Yzerman, considered one of the greatest captains in NHL history, he doesn't have a fiery personality. But what he had was a burning desire to win, and he was well respected. I definitely think Anze Kopitar has those qualities, and I think he still has those qualities. Now, we aren't in the locker room to know exactly what he says or how other players react to what he says, but I believe when Anze Kopitar speaks to his teammates, they absolutely listen. I believe if you gave all the Kings players truth serum and asked them, who do you respect most on the team and who do you think should be the captain of the team, I think every one of them would say Anze Kopitar. And while leadership is obviously important, being a team captain is also about representing the organization. And Anze Kopitar has done that as well as anyone ever has. He has, more of an obligation to speak to the media at times. He does that. He certainly on the ice with that C on his chest is going to talk to the officials on the ice. I'm sure that he's well respected as far as that goes. Obviously, he does the ceremonial things that the captain does, the dropping of the puck and all that kind of stuff. The numbers are what they are. As captain of the Kings, I guess the record is what it is. As captain of the Kings, Anze Kopitar has not been the captain of the team that has won a playoff series. But does anyone really think that if Drew Doughty had the C on his sweater, that it would be any different? I mean, Doughty's fiery. Doughty's someone who never holds his tongue. I don't think it would have changed anything. I think there's also a thought that some would like Anze Kopitar to have the C taken away from him. I just think that would be an unbelievable slap in the face to a player who's given everything he has to this organization, has represented it in the best way possible on and off the ice. The Kings screwed that up when they did that to Dustin Brown. That was a huge mistake. I would sincerely hope that they would never do that again. And certainly not to a player of the status of Anze Kopitar. As for Kopi's future, he's got 1 year left on a 2-year deal that pays him $7 million per season. Next season would be his 20th in the NHL, and I have a feeling it is probably going to be his last. Now, he's not just holding on to a roster spot like we've seen with some legendary players who, maybe don't want to call it a career, but I think there is something to be said for going out while you're still a player that can help a team. And I would think that next season, he's going to be more of a number 2 center. His ice time will be cut down. Don't know if he'll be playing alongside Adrian Kempe anymore. We'll see. We'll certainly talk about that as we go along. What could the line combinations be for the Kings? That'll be a discussion that'll likely come, when training camp's getting ready to start, because you don't know what the final roster will be for the Kings. But I would think that Anze Kopitar is and should be incredibly satisfied with the career that he has had. The only thing that maybe could change his mind, maybe have him stick around a little longer, is if the Kings had an incredible season and a deep playoff run, and if he had a good individual season, maybe that would convince him to sign a 1-year deal and take one more run at it. But I do think, I have a feeling that next season is going to be Anze Kopitar's last as an LA King. And again, as a fan, if you're a fan of him like I am, and again, if you're a Kings fan, it would be hard to believe you're not an Anze Kopitar fan. Appreciate him for probably one final season next season. There are current players from the Kings organization playing in the World Championships. Plus, the Kings may be looking to replace a coach in the organization. We'll tell you about that and more next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and during the action with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Which players are showing up in the biggest moments? How could tracking their trends help you build your next bet? What would it look like to combine live prop bets mid-game based on how the action unfolds? If you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a same-game parlay? How could a $200 bonus in bets add to your excitement if your first $5 bet hits? New to FanDuel? It's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Well, we know the LA Kings are looking for their next general manager. Maybe after that, they might be looking for a head coach, but we have heard news that maybe the Kings will need to hire a new head coach for the Ontario Reign. Reports are, and Elliot Friedman, one of the top hockey insiders, reporting that former King player, assistant coach, and current Ontario Reign head coach Marco Sturm is a finalist for the vacant Boston Bruins head coaching job. Sturm played for the Bruins for 5 seasons, still has ties to that organization. It'll be interesting that Sturm, was for a while talked a lot about being the next head coach of the LA Kings at some point. And I think the Kings felt like he was too inexperienced to be able to handle an NHL team that was perceived as being close as far as winning a championship. And frankly, I agreed with that thinking at the time. But Marco Sturm, again, has been a name that for a while has been talked about as a guy who could be a future LA Kings head coach. I think the Kings really respect his hockey knowledge, but they wanted him to get more seasoned as a head coach, and he's done that to varying degrees of success over the last few years with the Ontario Reign. He, this past year, was his 3rd season as head coach of the Reign. Now, his teams have made the playoffs each season under Marco Sturm, but they haven't had much postseason success. Frankly, it's kind of been a little bit like the LA Kings in that they get in the playoffs, but they don't stick around very long. And as a matter of fact, they were out very quickly this past postseason, 2 and out in the AHL playoffs. That having been said, again, Marco Sturm, respected in the Kings organization. I do think maybe at some point they were looking at him to be a coach of the future. But where the team is right now, I don't know that he would be in their plans if the new GM were to come in and want to make a coaching change. I'm sure he could get an interview for it. They might talk to him. But again, I don't know that, we've mentioned it before. What do you want? If the Kings replace Jim Hiller, you don't replace a coach who has limited experience and who showed that he didn't have that experience in the big moment with a coach who has no NHL experience. That makes no sense. So while I like Marco Sturm, I understand why he's respected in the organization. It's unlikely he's going to get his shot with the LA Kings soon, you wouldn't think. So, the Boston Bruins have an opening. They like him. There's a relationship there. So we'll see if he gets that job or not. If so, then obviously the Kings will be looking to find a new head coach for the Ontario Reign. We'll keep an eye out for that. Also keeping an eye on the IIHF World Championships that are going on right now in Sweden and Denmark. This event sort of like an extra event for players whose teams are out of the NHL playoffs quickly. Also prospects on different teams also like to take part in this as well. Although there are some pretty big names participating in the World Championship this year. None bigger than Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, and David Pastrnak. Those are 3 elite NHL names that are over there taking part in this with their teams either not making the playoffs or getting knocked out quickly. You might remember last year, Kevin Fiala played for Switzerland and was the MVP of the event. And I fretted every game that he was playing because I didn't want him to get hurt. Well, there are 4 members of the LA Kings organization taking part this year, 2 from the LA Kings. Kevin Fiala has joined the event in progress, just like he did last year. And Philip Deneau is playing as well. Fiala missed Switzerland's opening game. He did have an assist in a 3-0 win over the USA earlier today. So again, Kevin Fiala taking part in that event for Switzerland. Philip Deneau did not have a point in Canada's opening win over Slovenia 4-0. He did have an assist in their 7-1 rout of Latvia. And as usual, we will keep our fingers crossed that both Kevin Fiala and Philip Deneau come out of this event completely healthy. Also at the event is Kings goalie prospect Hampton Slakinski, fresh off backstopping Western Michigan University to the NCAA National Championship as a freshman. He's on the team as the 3rd goalie behind NHLers Jeremy Swayman of the Boston Bruins and Joey Decord of the Seattle Kraken. But what an amazing opportunity for Hampton Slakinski to get this kind of experience being around NHL players, especially Swayman and Decord. I mean, he's not expected to see any action unless there's an injury of some sort, but to get to practice with NHL caliber players, to take shots from NHL caliber players, to be able to talk with Jeremy Swayman and Joey Decord about playing the position at the highest level, the techniques they use, the training that they do off season, just learning everything, I think is amazing for Hampton Slakinski. And I think this is awesome that he's taking part in this event. And also, I think a pretty big statement and a compliment to him that Team USA would select him to get this experience. I think it says that Team USA thinks that he is a possible Team USA goalie of the future, and they want to give him a little firsthand experience. So while I'm okay with Fiala and Deneau taking part in this event, I'm really excited for Hampton Slakinski. I think this is amazing, and this is awesome. Also, one other player I did want to mention, Ontario Reign forward and Kings prospect Martin Chromiak is playing in the World Championships for Team Slovakia. No points so far for him in the team's 4-0 loss to Sweden, and also no points in their 3-1 win over Slovenia. So Kevin Fiala, Philip Deneau, Hampton Slakinski, and Martin Chromiak, all part of the Kings organization, taking part in the IHF World Championships. We'll keep you updated on their progress as this event will be going on until May the 25th. All right, for you everydayers, those who listen to watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on our next show, we'll give you the latest on the Kings GM search, do another player spotlight, and update you on the latest at the World Championships and whatever else comes up. If you want to send an email to the show for our weekly fan feedback shows or for any other reason, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. Always welcome to post your thoughts on each show if you're watching on YouTube in the comment section. We would love for you to stay connected with the show through social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.